Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Blue Bounty Hunter channel. And out of these Jedi, who looks like the smartest? This guy? No, maybe this guy. How about Ki Adi Mundi, who was a shocking Syrian Jedi that not only had 5 wives due to his planet's culture, but also went on a revenge spree once, attempting to kill the leader of a gang terrorizing his planet. And today, I'll be explaining how he combined his sometimes contradictive beliefs with the Aturo fighting style to be powerful in battle, but at least that beats his hairline, which is worse than Chewbacca.
They've gone too far. This is madness.
One of his most notable force powers were his telekinetic blasts, which he could use to make craters in the ground like he did against General Grievous on Hippori. Also, Mundi used force healing to a certain level, like the moment when he healed a broken collarbone aboard a skiff on Tatooine, very similar to the ones we see Jabba using in Return of the Jedi. And like many Jedi, such as Qui-Gon Jinn, Ki Adi Mundi was able to jump unnaturally high to even the level of a moving LAAT gunship. Another skill that would sometimes fly over your head but is actually pretty notable was his knowledge of Huttese on top of galactic standards, so he was pretty well versed in a few different languages. He was also a great pilot that dogfighted pirates, engaged Aurra Sing in a space battle, and also landed his ship once in a way to cause a sandstorm which destroyed the ship behind him by clogging the intakes of the vessel. Despite the surprising things I told you earlier in the video, Mundi was actually quite stoic and had strong judgment, courage, and practical thinking, meaning he always tried to look into the logical meaning of things, which in most cases was smart, but as for the rediscovery of the Sith, made him question their likelihood, even if it was true to those who opened themselves to the state of the Force. He was also empathetic and had no fear of death, believing to die was to just become one with the Force. Also, he thought sacrificing yourself for a cause was the greatest honor, and Mundi also liked to feel drops of water fall down on his head while meditating, so that each represented a fallen Jedi during the Clone Wars. And imagine you're just a clone walking into Mundi's tent and you just see him basically doing Chinese water torture to himself, and you're just like, General, are you alright? Yes, don't worry, Sergeant, I'm just meditating. He was also a great general that could rally his troops into a cutthroat spirit, like at the battles of Argoner and Hippori. Unfortunately, as we see at Hippori, while that probably helped a little bit, it was not too big of a challenge for General Grievous to kill all of the clones there. The character was designed by artistic director Ian McKeag for The Phantom Menace, in which the team experimented with different alien designs to appear on the Council, and unused art for Revenge of the Sith showed Mundi with an eye patch, indicating he lost his eye in the war, but this would not actually be used in the movie, as it would have probably been a little bit too distracting. His lightsaber had a unique, cylindrical, rigid hilt, which was green during his training, purple as a knight, and later blue up till his death. Also in a shot from episode 2, Ki Adi Mundi was mistakenly given a green blade, even though all shots before and after show him with the true blue lightsaber, which in and of itself fitted the Jedi due to his bravery and intelligence in battle. Silas Carson was the actor that actually not only played Ki Adi Mundi, but also Newt Gunray, as well as a pilot, I believe, in episode 1. So yeah, he was really enthusiastic about the character, and with a lot of these alien characters, George would actually give them a different voice than the actor on set, but with Ki Adi Mundi, he liked Carson's performance so much that he ended up just keeping it in. And he actually looked at like elderly people to see how to move and stuff for the character, so that is pretty cool. Especially when you have all these background characters that there actually is a lot of thought going into them, even if they are barely in the movies. He was born in 93 BBY, making him 74 in episode 3 at the time of his death. The male to female birth rate on Syria was 1 to 20, and Mundi was one of the very few males in his entire village, with all of his siblings being sisters to him. His parents lived with him on a secluded farm for the first 4 years of his life, which was a typical practice of Syrians who were not only isolated from the rest of the galaxy, but also were against technology, which confused Ki Adi Mundi as a child since it interested him so much, but he would later understand the virtuous ways of his homeworld and how they basically did not depend on technology but would use it if it was necessary. Early on, Ki Adi Mundi showed his skills in the Force and would use them to sense the raiders of Ben Gardazan before they even arrived. When word of his abilities spread throughout and past Syria, a metal beast would descend onto the planet, and the Dark Woman would walk out, which was really just a starship and the Jedi Anya Kuro. Despite most Force sensitives being trained when they are infants, Ki Adi Mundi was allowed to start as old as 4 due to his potential. Even though Kuro was not his master, Mundi would call her first teacher for the rest of his life and would always be very grateful for her original teachings and lessons to him. Instead, Yoda would be the master to train the young child, proving to be a great teacher as you would expect. He became very powerful with a lightsaber and could even deflect the shots of multiple remotes with ease, and these remotes are like the little ball Luke used to practice against in episode 4. Yoda warned Ki Adi Mundi of his blind spot though, which was pride, and this was a trait that would show up again throughout his life. Mundi would sometimes be tempted by the dark side, however, with feelings of hatred towards Zahn, who had raided his village as a child and physically beat his father, and these were thoughts Yoda warned him to move against. At 25, Ki Adi Mundi passed his trials to become a Jedi Knight and became the watchman of a sector including Syria. He used this opportunity to return to his homeworld and fulfill the promise he once made to his father to take care of Zahn. When he arrived, he told his family of tales of his training and then learned the raids still took place, minus Zahn, who no longer participated in them. Ki refused help from his people despite the extremely dangerous state of the raider camp, showing a moment of pride and arrogance. His plan was to take out the leader Zahn, and then the rest would scatter and be dealt with by local authorities. He then challenged Ben Garda Zahn, claiming he could fight them with his hands tied behind his back. Then the new leader of the raiders, who had defeated Zahn before, took this request literally and made Ki fight her with his hands tied behind his back, as she used a spear. Since Mundi was not skilled enough yet to fight without his lightsaber, he was easily defeated, and when he woke up tied to a wooden post in a tent, Zahn tried to slit his throat in order to win back his leadership, but Mundi used the Force to untie his ropes and then defeat Zahn and the guards that came in afterwards. Now free with his hands and much more wise, Ki Adi Mundi would defeat the gang leader and then convince the others not to face off against his wrath, even though he knew he couldn't defeat them all. Zahn attempted to kill the Jedi again, but Ki just left them alive and decided their powerless state was more impactful than a death caused by dark side urges. So while he did have a moment of pride earlier, he ended up overcoming this, as we can see here. Because of the low birth rate of Syrian males and also their customs, the Jedi Master was allowed later in life the rare exception of having wives and children, which usually wouldn't work due to the forbidden nature of attachments in the code, but therefore Mundi had to balance between caring and loving for them while also not being attached, which proved to be difficult, but he managed to keep the balance. And I bet Anakin wishes he could just pull out Ancestry.com and be like, yeah, it turns out my dad that didn't exist was actually Syrian, so you know what that means. And it is noted that he actually had 5 wives, which is probably surprising to most, but in his culture that was the acceptable thing. And we already went over the fact that there were barely any males on the planet, so it makes sense. His loyalty to the Jedi was proved when his entire family was killed immediately in the Battle of Syria during the Clone Wars, when Mundi would use his focus on the war efforts to get over his grief. Also during the Clone Wars, this Jedi Master was put in charge of the Galactic Marines alongside Commander Bakara, which was an elite and heavily armed rapid reaction unit that were some of the most fearsome in the clone army. Ki and Bakara occasionally disagreed on things, but overall had respect for each other. When Mundi was fighting in the Battle of Maikito, Bakara and his men turned on Mundi after receiving Order 66 and planning to execute him at the most vulnerable moment with his back turned to them on a narrow bridge. After turning around confused, Mundi realized far too late after hesitation that the Marines were about to open fire on him, and even though he deflected some of the shots back at the clones, killing 3 of them, he was hit in the stomach and then riddled with bolts. So even though his death is the first one we see in Order 66, it actually turns out that it probably took longer than most of them, because with most of the deaths, the clones basically just heard the order and then killed the Jedi, and that was that. But with Mundi, they actually had to wait until they got onto this bridge and he had his back turned to them and stuff. So yeah, it is weird that we see that one first. It actually makes sense, but it was in fact later than most of them. So even though in the intro and the thumbnail and stuff, I kind of claim that Ki Adi Mundi is a very bad person, and there's a lot of YouTube videos and stuff that will say he is a very bad Jedi. At the end of the day, he probably was one of the more stoic and kind and wise, and yeah, actually after making this video, I don't think he's that bad at all. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. I upload every Friday and sometimes on Sunday too at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, I post shorts on Saturday, but yeah, see ya.